بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ومولانا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا مولانا محمد وبارك وسلم عليه. اللهم ربنا أرنا الحق حقا وارزقنا اتباعه وأرنا الباطل باطلا وارزقنا اجتنابه. اللهم أرنا حقائق الأشياء كما هي، ربنا زدنا علما وعملا وإخلاصا يا رب العالمين. اللهم انصر أولياءك في مشارق الأرض ومغاربها. اللهم انصرهم على عدوك وعدوهم إنك على كل شيء قدير. اللهم فرج عنا من إخواننا في مشارق الأرض ومغاربها. اللهم نفس كربنا وكربهم وثبت أقدامنا وأقدامهم والطف بنا وبهم يا أرحم الراحمين يا رب العالمين. وصل وسلم على سيدنا ومولانا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا ومولانا محمد وبارك وسلم عليه. سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. آمين آمين يا رب العالمين. We're continuing a reading of this entry on Kant's conception of time. We looked at Plato's conception of time last time. Plato, just read it again. So Plato followed a Pythagorean strain of argument which distinguished between limited and unlimited, infinite and finite time, which is basically based on his distinction between the ideal world and the ideal world and what we call real world. But obviously for Plato, ideal world is the real world, and our real world or phenomenal world is the pale reflection of that ideal world. In his cosmological argument, Timaeus, he speaks of time as moving image of eternity. So eternity is the ideal world, and our time is basically a functionalization of or a movement of that eternal world, or part of it, or reflection of it. Depends on how you read it. In this way, Hegel can be read as Plato, a disciple of Plato as well. So that's one way of looking at the relationship between Plato's ideal world and real world. But there are others. So distinguishing between eternal time, which rests in unity, and the time of those states which affect moving and sensible things, of which generation is the cause. Okay, while Plato begins with eternal time and see temporal events as oriented towards it, Aristotle begins with now. I mean, that's the contentious way of reading, at least arguably contentious way of reading Plato, because how can you say that Plato didn't start with now? But for both Plato and Aristotle, now cannot be described self-sufficiently. That's why we have to go beyond. The only difference between Plato and Aristotle is that they do that in different ways. That's my understanding anyway. I'm not claiming any authority for that, but seems to be obvious. But since we are more interested at this point in Kant's conception of time, that's why we won't dwell on these points in this reading anyway, and sees time as an accident of motion. He sees time as the accident of motion which emerges from the experience of before and after. Time is accident of motion. What does it mean? What does he mean? This author. What's his name? Forgot his name, but anyway, Aristotle. So accident. I don't think he's using it as a philosophical term accident, uh, as in the distinction between substance and accident. So motion. I mean, we can say that both for both Plato and I'm just trying to think it through, and Aristotle. Um, Firstly, motion is some sort of what's the word I'm using? Some sort of defect. Yeah, that's the word I'm using. Looking for defect, because in eternal world for both of them, which is in a way real world for both of them in their own way, there's no motion. So that's why for both of them, eternity. I'm just saying, just thinking, eternity is a different form of time, which is not connected to motion in a way. So they are both talking here time as a phenomenal time, or time as related to our natural world. So in that sense, if Plato says that time is, did he say motion is time is the accident of motion, or let me check. Yes, he says time is accident of motion. So we can read it as similar to how we read Plato, because that without motion we won't have time. So we can say that for Aristotle, time as an accident of motion, he might mean that our perception of time, or our time, as against eternity, is linked to, or intrinsically linked to, our experience of and perception of motion and change. So without motion and change, we won't have time in the normal sense of the word. For both Plato and Aristotle, I think. So from this we can say that for Aristotle, time is not motion itself. They are different, because somewhere in physics he says that uh, time is the number of motion. It's not motion itself. In physics he says time is the number of motion with respect to before and after. So from this we can say that time, although it's not motion itself, in a way we can say that time is a measure of motion for him, motion for Aristotle. But time is not motion itself. That's the first. Time is not motion itself. Meaning that he distinguishes Aristotle distinguishes time from motion. Distinguishes time from motion. Okay, and so, for example, a motion can be faster and slower, but time itself is uniform in a way. For Aristotle, I think, because it is a number. On the other, and also motion is specific to the thing which is moving, but time is everywhere. But we can say that time is generated by motion. Without motion, there won't be any time in our sense of it. Okay, that's the first thing, and that brings to us to the second point about Aristotle, that time is dependent on motion. So without motion and change, there is no time for Aristotle. Okay, and the third point, I already said that time is the measure of the motion. Motion for, it's a number of the, as he says, number of the motion. Okay, so I think it's these are the points which came out of our discussion. So so in that sense, motion is prior to time. So in that sense, time is the accident of motion, shouldn't be taking as. But it is true that without motion there won't be time. In that sense, time is an accident of motion in this particular sense. So for Aristotle, time begins with now and sees time as an accident of motion which emerges from the experience of before and after. When we do perceive a before and after, then we say that there is time. For time is just this, a number of motion respect to before. Yeah. Okay, so that is it for Aristotle. So probably we'll stop here. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك نشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك. وسلم على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا ومولانا محمد. سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين. آمين يا رب العالمين.